Hey guys, don't forget to check out the Street Cop Training Conference April 23rd through the 28th, 2023 at the Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center. It's going to be a great experience. 5 career-changing days, some of the most profound speakers in the industry. Guest speakers include Rob O'Neill, the guy who killed Bin Laden, Kyle Carpenter, the youngest living Congressional Medal of Honor winner, Fox News host Tommy Lahren, Navy SEAL American war hero Jason Redman, Sheriff David Clark, Sheriff Mark Lamb, and Sheriff Wayne Ivey. You'll also spend time with all of our Street Cop instructors at this event Monday through Friday. We'll have a great lineup of courses in addition to our great speakers. It will be a week that you will not forget. You'll be thankful you came. You don't want to miss out. Check out streetcop.com on how to register. If you're going to use the room code, make sure you book it from Sunday through Friday. That's what the code's good for, and it's about half the price of the regular rate. But those rooms are running out, so make sure you sign up now. We'll see you there.
111, 110.
You training to be a street cop?
Welcome to the Street Cop Podcast. I'm Sean Grogan, the instructor for Unmasking Hidden Facial Expressions and Body Language for Law Enforcement. I'm also the author of the book, Beware the Body. I'll let Mark introduce himself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Mark Tagliareni. I'm the instructor for Fundamentals of Report Writing, and I teach a course for Street Cop that deals with report writing, obviously. And, Sean and I have discussed a lot of different things back and forth. We get a lot of the same questions, I think, sometimes about how to document things properly in reports. So, I'm thrilled to be here with Sean today and cover that topic for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely something I get asked constantly. How do you describe body language in a report? And I pretty much say, describe what it is you're seeing. And I'm sure you could give a much better answer than I can with that. That's just pretty much a very basic boilerplate answer, because I guess we try to be, we talked about this before, as objective as possible. Yeah. Leave the subjectivity out of it. Absolutely. As I feel a certain way, like we were talking before, if you want to expand on the someone appeared angry or aggressive. Yep. What does that mean?
Yeah, because angry and aggressive, right, they're vague, and believe it or not. And I think any cop that deals with people, that will probably, if we were all in the same situation with someone who's angry or aggressive or uncooperative, I think we all probably agree that they are that, but that's an emotion and that's an opinion. So we have to document that, and by the facts that we observe, like the behaviors that we observe, I think when we're documenting and writing reports, let that reader come to the conclusion that they're angry or aggressive, And, before we started, we were talking about body language, and we'll get more into that too. But I would be from a street cop, road cop level, I would keep things simple as far as factually describe what you're seeing, unless you're an expert like you, and we can get maybe into more of the minutia of what you're seeing.
Well, let me ask you this. We talked about anger and describing exactly what you're seeing. So if you've been to, let's say, my class for Unmasking Hidden Facial Expressions, a one-day class, and you know that the universal expression for anger is the eyebrows lowered, both eyelids being pulled up, could have the mouth tight, lips disappearing, or it could be baring teeth, and the chin thrust forward. Yeah. Now, let's say you described that in your report from someone you were dealing with, and it's clear as day in the body cam. Would you also, or let's say the body cam falls off, or you don't have a body cam, would you then write down afterwards that through my training experience, I know this to be indicative of anger, or would you leave that for something that you would discuss in court if you had to? Yeah,
that's a good question. I'm glad. I want to get back to body cameras too. Okay. I will definitely cover that. But I think once you quantify with the facts, you got to be careful with opinions and police reports, but certainly you could say, hey, after I saw the eyes closing that way, the eyebrows, furrowed and the teeth, closed and maybe someone's yelling, how about the volume of their voices are talking to you? Like you and I are having a nice calm conversation. I don't think anybody's gonna say that we're angry, but if you document in that in your report that as they were answering my questions, the volume of their voice, they were screaming, they were loud, right? They were interrupting me as I talked. Let the reader come to the conclusion they're angry, but maybe you could sum it up and say, based on my training and experience and all the behaviors that I observed, it seemed to me, or it appeared, right, that they were angry or they were they were being antagonistic. I think it's okay to quantify all those behaviors because factually, I think, it's your opinion, but it's still, you're basing your opinion and you're saying in your report, hey, it's my opinion. I feel that this person was angry based on all of these.
Based on it, okay.
And I don't think a good defense attorney is gonna ask you, maybe on the stand about your opinion if you've documented all those behaviors accurately, because that gives you the perfect opportunity to turn to the jury and go, that client was angry. Based on everything that I was observing in my training experience, that client was angry, or they appeared to be intoxicated, or whatever it was. I don't think a defense attorney, if you document everything really accurately, like all those things you described, I don't think a defense attorney is going to ask that question.
It's funny you bring up defense attorneys. Now, when I go over in a class, the sclera, which is the whites of the eyes surrounding the iris, during fear and surprise above the iris. If you look at the average person's eyelids, the average, now everybody's different, but the overall majority of people, the eyelids sit just over the start of the iris. Okay. People become surprised or fear. It's not the only time it happens, but during surprise and fear, you will have the whites of the eyes showing the sclera. And I've written this in reports. And I remember once you wrote, like, what is this? What is this? And I'm like, just leave it in there. Come on, sir, just leave it in. He's like, okay. Because my thought is, if you get something that a defense attorney doesn't know about, I'm sure there's some defense attorneys listening right now going,
yeah.
But if I'm putting something in a report, from my experience as a canine handler, if it's something they don't know about, they don't want to prod too much.
Right.
So you go in there as the canine handler, they're like, hey, what drugs does your dog hit on? And I turn to the jury, I go, my dog doesn't hit on drugs. It's on the presence of the odor narcotics. Would you like to know what those are? And then you go back, because it's something they don't, and you might get one or two more questions and then done. Because we're not a dog state. There's not a lot of dogs in the state, in Jersey at least. So in my opinion, I always felt that if you put something in there they don't know, plus you got to make them look it up. Now the defense attorney's going to spend 30 seconds to look up what a sclera is. What's your opinion on that? Do you think it's leave the technical terms out, or put them in if you know what they are, or just leave them out for, what's your opinion on that?
I would say if you're an expert in body language and behaviors, someone who has that level of education and experience in it, I would put it in. I think if you're a cop who's taken Sean's class once, I don't think that makes you an expert, right? So if you start putting stuff like that in your reports, because you're right, I think a defense attorney is going to look it up and maybe have a few more questions for you. And then if you don't know the answers to those follow-up questions, then all of a sudden your credibility gets diminished a little bit. So I would just describe exactly what you're seeing. Maybe even say, hey, I took a class where it was described to me most people, the top of the eyebrow comes to the top of the eye. And in this case, I was seeing this factually. This is what I was seeing. Technical terms, I think I would keep things. In my class, I talk about keeping things simple. So a lay person can pick up your report, read all the facts, and determine, you know what? This sounds like someone who was being nervous or evasive or angry just based on the facts that you've reported. And I think in plain language, unless you're an expert. If you're an expert like you or Brad, who I know is coming in today to talk about, to do some material, he's an expert in traps. He can talk about traps in his reports, because he's been deemed a courtroom expert.
Yeah.
No. So, but we were talking about body cams, and that was one of the things I was thinking about for the last few days, knowing that we were going to talk about this. They're a great tool. We've had, where I work in Wyckoff and Bergen County, we've had mobile video recorders probably since 2000, and we had, I think they're a great tool. If you don't have them, don't be afraid of them. Now everybody's in the state should be wearing, in New Jersey should be having body cameras. And if you have them, in wherever you work, use them as a tool. You see Kenny, right? When he's about to stop a car, he's got that camera rolling for a while because he wants to see the behavior of the driver. Use that, turn that camera on, and or Scott Kivett, when you take his course, you'll see when he's behind a car, he turns his camera on and he's actually talking out loud about all the different things that he's observing, the facts that he's observing. Hey, the driver just looked back at me in their side view mirror. That car just hit the fog line. Hit the fog line again. They just threw something out the window. And he's using that camera as a really effective tool, because not only are you documenting, but now you can go back and watch that and go, hey, guess what? At this point, this is what they did. So you use the body camera. It's such an effective tool, and it's not going to capture everything, but it's definitely going to help you remember, because you might be talking to a driver or a passenger in a car, and the camera, when you look back at it, may not see everything that's going on. You might have something in the back seat that it's not catching, but at least use the camera, document, say, hey, while you're asking those questions, why are there 3 cell phones or whatever on the back seat? Whose are they, right? Like, use that to your advantage and document it in your report. Because if it's not in your report, you're probably not going to be able to get it on the stand. Like a good defense attorney is not going to let you get that stuff in. But like you said, like you're going to hopefully capture body language and behaviors and stuff on a body cam, and you could say, right here, this is what I was seeing in their face, and that use that opportunity to document it because those are facts. It's hard to dispute facts.
So you still would describe that, what you see?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's one thing I always wondered about, or just go, hey, it's on the camera. But I guess to describe, I bring up one thing about putting the palms out. Because how many times, and those of you listening, if you've been on the job for more than probably a month, you've seen this. Hey, turn around, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest. Well, hold on, I don't think that warrants is good. And they actually put your palms out. And a lot of times take a step back in proxemic distance with the palms up towards the chest or down by the waistline. And telling you pretty much to stop. What does this mean in our culture? A lot of times, unless it's giving up, and you're not giving up when you're here or here, it's usually telling you to stop. So I always bring up tell me how you feel about it. Would you put that as well, the open palm, saying stop? Because it's something, in my opinion, that the average person watching that body cam is not going to say that person told them to stop. But we know as cops how many times this has happened to us, taking that step back, being like, oh no, hold on. And then a lot of times you've had to go hands on because they're getting ready to resist you. Yeah, definitely. I think about it. Like if you're going to go hands on, now you're going to be filling out use of force reports as well, right? So you're going to, what led you up, either pulling out pepper spray because you told them they're under arrest and they were like, whoa. And where they didn't say stop or they started backing up and, from hands out or hands up here, that they weren't following your commands and you gave more commands. You could factually, I told them again, or her, put your hands behind your back. And they kept backing up and they weren't listening. Right. And I would say, and I saw the palms of their hands and based on my training experience, I mean, you have a lot more experience in that I was, concerned that they weren't going to be, they weren't going to be compliant because of their behaviors, of their factual behaviors of what they were doing, like hands up. And then, you're going to continue to document what happened next. Because I don't think you may not go hands on right away from that point. Yeah. You're going to try to de-escalate, right? Yeah. You're not going to, don't dump anybody on the ground and say, we wrote it, I heard this podcast. Especially in New Jersey right now. Oh, forget it. Now, I mean, and now with the new use of force guidelines, right? It's the everything we're being trained is there's a priority on de-escalation, which obviously I agree with that. The thing that I'm sure most Jersey officers that are probably listening to this are probably like, we've been doing that all along. Yeah. I don't need 7 core values and principles to tell me this. I've been doing this all along. Look, we all know a few bad apples ruin every bunch. But yeah, so that's why it's even more important, I think, to articulate. But I get reports where people will say, hey, take a look at this report. And I agree. I think they rely too much on their body camera to tell the story. I would look at your body cam as a tool and tell the story using that tool, but you have to tell that story accurately, factually, exactly how it happened, and you also have to know that story better than anybody else, better than any defense attorney, because if you go to court, they're going to be pouring over your body cam footage and your report, and if they're not accurate to each other, that's where you get into trouble, and you might run into some problems with the defense attorney finding some holes. Yeah. So, I would definitely describe everything you're seeing in your report because you don't want to rely just on your body. Just about. Okay. So, and that's one thing I want to ask you about too. I mean, how ridiculous was it that they were trying to come up with, hey, I forget, some legislation was trying to go forward saying, you can't look at your body. Now, those of you in free America, you might not be aware of this, but in the state of New Jersey, they were trying to make it so that you were not allowed to look at your body cam after an incident, or any cam, dash cam or anything, and you were supposed to write your report on memory so that they could later go on and pretty much give it to you. It's just madness because we all know how our memories work, and maybe because of the kind of gentler society we're in today, people don't realize when you're in a fight, things go quickly, your adrenaline's up. How many people today might be on a that you might have to deal with that are on a jury that have never even been in a fight before or something. Right. And they're not aware of the fact that you forget things, pieces miss, things happen so quick. And then you see something on camera, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is why I took this action. This is why I felt this way and had to do this. But because the legislation in the state of New Jersey tried, and then I think it was the one woman, was she a sheriff's officer or something from up in North Jersey. She got legislation saying that we could.
Yeah.
She got it passed. Whatever happened, we got saved that way. But
Yeah.
could you imagine telling somebody that has to make these type of decisions afterwards? Yeah, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to try to screw you as much as possible. And that's the People's Republic of New Jersey.
That was, I'll say this, once that came out, it was insane. I was like, this is really going to be a disaster for police officers in New Jersey because, like you said, you're never going to remember all the details. No. How many times have you even, you're never going to remember the details in the order that they happened, especially if it's like something fluid, like a fight or your pursuit or something. And then you may remember the details, and then you go back and you watch your body cam, like, oh wow, all right, I thought that happened first, but you know what? Now I remember the order.
Yeah.
And they're asking you to write a report to something that's, your brain is being flooded, your body's flooded with adrenaline, your memory's not going to be as clear as sharp as, and they're telling you can't use your body camera footage to write your initial report. So it came out, I think the initial legislation was you can't watch your body cam or your mobile video recorder to write your initial report. So a lot of the consensus among cops and I think the prosecutor's office in each county was picking up on it was like, well, we don't want, these reports that just say, saw perp, arrested, same essentially, and refer to my body camera. Yeah. And then they were saying, I guess the legislation was something along the lines of after your initial report is written, you can go in and review. And then they finally came to their senses, I think, and they changed it. They said, okay, cops can watch their body camera footage prior to writing their initial report because it is setting you up for failure.
It really is. And like you said, that's exactly what would probably happen if you're smart. Then they would probably make legislation saying you can't write revert report. We need a full detailed whatever.
Absolutely. They did kind of, I know Bergen County prosecutors came out. They like foresaw that. They were like, these cops are going to go, well, refer to my body camera footage. Yeah. Like, screw you, right? I wouldn't want to be jumping in and coming out with these detailed reports. And they even said, well, we don't want reports that are real vague, your initial report being real vague and saying, only giving minor details. But what do you expect me to do as a police officer?
Yeah.
You're really putting me, at a disadvantage by not being able to watch something that a defense attorney is going to get in discovery.
Yeah, it's just madness. It's someone probably that's never done police work that came up with this theory that, well, we need this to get done because then the mind will do something. It's something that, if you've done the work before, as well as I do.
Yeah.
It's something that you look back and you're like, oh yeah, this happened. That's why I did this.
Yep.
And I never worked with a body cam, but patrolled the dash cams and narcotics. We didn't have any cameras, but now even narcs are wearing.
Yeah, everybody's got them, right? And it's interesting. It's an interesting. And I'm in the bureau now, so like our patrol officers are very good about they activate it for everything. But when you're not on the road every day, and if you're in narcotics or something and you're not used to it, it's definitely a learning curve. So you got to be cognizant of turning that thing on, which is good. Look, I really think it's an effective tool. I think it's better for us than it harms us, by and large, and use it like it is as an effective tool to accurately document what happened.
See, it would have saved me on a couple things where it's like clear as day. Well, if I had the body cam, you would know this happened and not the shenanigans that are you're getting accused of. However, I'm a little hesitant about saying that they're good, and I never had one. But my opinion is also, especially with like you said, de-escalation is a good thing. We've been doing that all along.
Yeah.
But now when you go and they're like pushing it, de-escalation, and they're like, oh, I've got a camera, someone's going to second guess what I'm doing. And you talk to some cops, they're like, oh, my administration looks over, and I'm like, well, why did you say this where you and I both know you got a million different ways to handle something.
Yeah.
And there's people out there going, well, how come you didn't do this to get that Monday morning quarterback from a supervisor or the fear of the public or anything else, and be like, well, this person's running at me with a knife. Let me de-escalate a little bit more. Let me just keep yelling, drop the knife. I don't need to, it's one of those things and people say, oh, well, it's just a knife. And if just a knife, go on YouTube or Google and look up Melbourne or Brisbane. I think it's Brisbane, it's pronounced Brisbane or Brisbane, in Australia, in the mall with a guy. Have you seen this video? The guy with the knife. He comes and, oh, it's just a knife. He comes, they're like fighting, hits him right in the carotid, boom, on the floor within seconds. Done.
Yep.
Like people, oh, it's just a knife. It's just a knife.
Just a knife.
Just not just
it's
a knife.
Weapon.
It's a knife.
Right.
Exactly. But why didn't you? And then the whole shoot him in the leg. And I've had family members ask me this before too. They're like, hey, can you just shoot someone in the leg? And I'm like, no. Hold on a second. Let's talk about this, because it's something and it wasn't asked derogatory. It was like actually curious, which I respect. Like people don't realize, yeah, you can try to shoot someone in the leg, but when your adrenaline's through the roof, you're going to try to hit this smaller part of the body as opposed to here. There's arteries in there, and people don't realize all these things. Now I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I know, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Like, your fine motor skills diminish when you're getting like that adrenaline dump. Like we're human beings. We're not freaking RoboCop where it's like, can you aim and shoot someone in the hip to knock them down? Like, I'm happy I hit him center mass, right? If they have a deadly weapon, right? Like you said, like, yeah, just a knife. Well, it was just a pool stick until they broke it in half, and now they tried to stab me with it. Yeah. So it's just, it's tough. We're in a really tough profession, I think, because everybody likes to have opinions about like what other profession do you know of other than maybe like being a doctor or something where people are that inquisitive and ask questions and say, hey, pull you aside at a party and ask you, right? I mean, you're not asking the accountant a bunch of questions about accounting, but cops, like people just feel like not only they ask questions, they're going to tell you like how you perhaps should have done your job better. And that's why documenting this shit is important, because maybe you can explain it more clearly to people like, hey, this is what I was feeling. That's like what you were feeling. I was a fear for my safety when this person pulled out a knife and they were 10 feet away from me, right? Because we all know like, and I think that even that 21-foot rule has been debunked now, right? Where you
still, because you got people that are faster than close the distance. It's funny you bring up doctor because I got my daughter's on a soccer team and one of the parents is a doctor and emergency room doctor and real nice guy. And it's one of those things like, I got questions for him, but I know better because we know. Like I know, and I know he shows up to parties, and he's probably like, "Oh, the doctor's here, right?" And he came from my understanding, like a working class family and everything, and it's probably like when you go, because I know when I show up, oh, here comes the detective, here comes the officer, and it's like, can I just walk into my family's, my extended family's house and not have to think about what I do? So like you said, the doctor's
it's crazy. Or how often are you introduced to people at parties and stuff? It's like, this is my friend Mark the cop. Like, why? Like,
why?
What does that have to do with it? I mean, Frankie's nodding his head in agreement, but I mean, do people like when you walk into a party, they go, hey, this is Frankie, the audiovisual guy, like, and I'm not saying that you used to name your name, like, but yeah, emergency room doctor, I want to ask him questions too, but
so
like,
do I. I feel like no, and then I'm like, all right, I got this thing going on, I want to, and I see the guy quite often, and I'm just like, no, don't ask him a fucking thing, and we'll talk about stuff too, like he'll talk about like what he goes through, but you can tell. I think he understands almost. I think there's like an understanding between us that, I mean, listen, we're on no fucking level, don't have any kind of education like doctors or anything like that. But there's that dealing with the general public and having a profession that defines who you are to a lot of people. And you brought up the adrenaline hitting the body and like the fine motor skills going. Do you have any tips or advice as far as documenting that when you're writing a report? Like, would you write, hey, my vision started to narrow, or is that something that you would steer clear of?
That's a good question. Listen, fortunately, I've never been in a situation where a deadly force, use of deadly force situation, right? And I know that that's something that's talked about in a lot of those. So where, you get all of a sudden, you get that tunnel vision and you may not pick up other things. And, you get that auditory exclusion and things like that, right? I think if you were in a situation like that, I would consider documenting it as far as like, this is what I was feeling. You may not, I think that's where your body camera and footage is really going to help, because you might watch it and you're going to go, oh shit, I completely forgot that happened because I was so, keyed in on this and trying to protect myself. If you're rolling around with someone and then, I don't know how much, your body cam hopefully is going to pick up different things, or use your partners as the cavalry is showing up. Okay, this is when this happened, because I think that's when it is really effective, when you're in a situation where your memory might be not working at all, right? I mean, how many times have you been dealing with people, civilians, you could tell that they are getting, an adrenaline dump, or they've been traumatized, or they're having a medical episode, and you can say the same thing to them 3 or 4 times and it's just not sinking in, But when, and that's something, I guess, document that too, right? Like, that's factual. If you tell someone roadside and you have to repeat yourself 4 times and it's just not sinking in. I told them 4 times, and this is what perhaps they were in my training experience, someone who is experiencing an adrenaline dump or extreme nerves, they're not hearing what I'm saying. That's how you get your opinion in, because factually you told someone something 4 times and they seemingly didn't understand it. or they seemingly didn't follow what you were telling them, maybe because other shit was going on. Now you don't know, you don't know factually if that was going on, but you want the reader to start thinking that way. Like, hey, maybe this person was so nervous that they couldn't follow my commands. They didn't understand my question because they were so nervous.
Okay.
I think documenting the behaviors and the facts you see accurately is just paint that picture for your reader. Paint that picture. Let that, when you're writing a report, let that, just think of the lay person walking down the street, picking up your report, or the person next to you on a plane who figures out that you're a cop, right? And they don't know anything about law enforcement, but yet they're going to ask you a ton of questions at a cocktail party or something. And, let that person, think about that person reading your report and going, wow, I understand why Sean or Mark were nervous, or they thought that this person might harm them, or they thought that the person they were talking to was nervous or hiding something, or they were lying. You can't come out and say someone's lying, but you could certainly paint a picture of why you believe they were, as far as you getting contradictory statements, or what you're seeing is telling you otherwise.
Now, you bring that up. Would you write then? Okay, state the facts. This is what happened. I brought the contradictory statement. I talked to the driver. They said this. The passenger said that. I also noticed this behavior when I brought this up.
Yeah.
And then would you, at the end of that, summarize due to the above facts or the aforementioned facts? Would you then say, I believe they might not have been truthful or that they were deceptive, or would you leave that out? Is that something?
Yeah, I like doing that. One of the things I teach in class is what I liked, after writing reports for years, to me, I think if you're going to be either on the stand or, you want to think, start your report with almost like the end in mind. If I end up on the stand, what potentially am I going to be asked? And what could a defense attorney look at my report? And if it's a motor vehicle stop, what are all the avenues of attack? Like perhaps your stop, right? So I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I'll get back to what you said. I really like hammering home why I'm stopping a car.
Okay.
Right. So if I'll use Kenny as an example. Kenny might initially pull out after a car for doing 74 and a 70, right? That's why he's going to stop that car. But as he's catching up to that car, now all of a sudden he observes more violations. The car's drifting. It's hit the fog line 3 or 4 times. It's failing to maintain its lane. So when I'm coming up behind it, if I'm about to pull over a car, I'll say, hey, I initially pulled out because the car had a cracked windshield. The entire windshield was cracked. I was going to stop it for that violation. As I was catching up, I saw this, and this. So now I stopped the car for the cracked windshield violation, failure to maintain lane, maybe if they were following too closely, whatever the violations are. So just to drive that home, I kind of summarize. These are all the reasons I'm getting involved in this. And then to your point, as far as either someone being deceptive or lying or being contradictory, or, hey, these are all the reasons I was now suspicious. So I'll document throughout my report. I talked to the driver and they told me they were coming from this place, and I talked to the passenger and they told me they're coming from this place, or whatever the lie is, right?
Yeah.
And you could even confront that person with it, but you're always almost giving them an out, right? If you say, hey, well, the passenger just told me this. In their mind, they're probably going, well, the fucking passenger's lying, even though they're probably both lying, right? But I like to say, hey, based on because always just, if you're listening to this podcast, just remember, it's always the totality of the circumstances. That's why you're suspicious. That's why you arrest someone. It's not one thing. Maybe it is. If, you saw someone, you're driving by, you see someone punch someone in the face, there you go. There's your probable cause, right? Yeah. But if it's something where you're going to ask for consent, you're going to call out a dog in New Jersey, and I like summing it up and saying, hey, I was now reasonably suspicious because I had contradictory stories from the driver and the passenger. That's a fact, right? There's no debating that. They gave you 2 bullshit stories. The passenger, you've documented this throughout, but the passenger had, and I got this from Kivit too, I like this, their pupils were constricted. They were sustained and distinct.
Distinct, oh, okay.
I hadn't really used that terminology in my report. Say, hey, their pupils were constricted, right? We know, pinpoints. They were pinpoints.
That's what I wrote.
We'd always write pinpoint.
Point, and I might use constricted, but I never use sustained and distinct. I like that. That's
right?
pretty good. Yeah,
So that's the great thing about this company. The more courses you take and the more podcasts you listen to and the more material you pick up little things. You're I like that. I'm going to use that. Everybody has their own way of doing things. But yeah, so from now on, I would say, hey, if someone had pupils that were constricted, that they were distinct and excuse me, sustained and distinct pinpoint pupils. They were pinpoint in that manner, because that's indicative. Now, again, you don't know factually that they're under the influence, but hey, your training and your training experience and education has taught you that someone who has pupils like that could possibly be under the influence of opiates. And now that's another reason you're suspicious, and you let that reader hopefully come to that conclusion.
I like you brought that up, that it's possible, and this is why I believe, because I actually brought this up when I was working. There was a supervisor, well, how do you know there's not another reason that could cause that, the pinpoint constriction? And I go, I don't know if there's another reason, but that's most of the time you're dealing with something. It's the totality of the circumstance. Someone has track marks, things of that nature. But then you look and you go, okay, well, there is another reason, because there's like some kind of medical condition that could cause I like that word. I really like sustained and distinct pinpoint pupil constriction of the pupils. So there's medical condition, at least one. So if there's one, there might be two. If there's two, there might be three. But just having that, because like you said, due to this, I believe it's possible, like, because nothing's 100%.
Training, education, experience.
Yeah, there's nothing 100%, but yeah, like
people who are under the influence of opiates, just, exhibit these signs. Yep. I'm not saying this person here is under the influence, but I've seen this shit before.
Yep.
Right? It's 40 degrees out there, sweating profusely.
Yeah.
Right? Like that one. Like that's another indicator. Like, and we don't deal. I haven't dealt with a whole lot of meth, but there's indicators of people who are under the influence of meth, and like Kivett talks about that. Actually, Sean Barnett too in his class, he talks about signs of people who are either under the influence or have neurological problems. Like, right?
Yeah.
If you see someone who has one pupil that's dilated and one that's constricted, get them to the fucking hospital, because that's a problem. Like, that's not. I don't think, generally speaking, there could be a brain problem there, like a brain injury. So, but if they're pinpoint pupils that are distinct and sustained, even in, you get them into the shade and they stay that way. Yeah. That's an indicator, and that's what you want to document, like, and exactly like that.
100%, because like you said, it could be more. And even bringing up that 40 degrees, that could be 40 degrees and someone's sweating profusely. They could have, if you work in an area where there's still heavy use or use at all of crack cocaine, they could have thrown the stem out. The rocks could have been gone. They're a passenger in the car. You're not worried about DUI. But they're sweating from the crack cocaine, or there's a medical condition called hyperhidrosis,
right,
where people are just sweating all the time. Many of you that work in larger departments, you probably got one or two of these guys, and they end up being the ones that you have to go fight someone with and get sweat all over you and stuff. I don't mean to offend anybody. I don't want the Hyperhidrosis Association of America coming at me or anything like that.
One of my friend's moms had that. Yeah, she was like her palm was constantly sweaty, and I was like, I never even knew that existed. But you're right. Yeah, like so. Is it likely that they're probably under the influence of something? Sure. Yeah. Right? We all know as cops.
Yep.
They probably are. But like, you can't say it factually. You could say, hey, but based on my training, education, experience, people who are under the influence of opiates or crack, like, these are signs that they will have been known to exhibit. That's why I was suspicious, because, let's not make this job harder than it is for ourselves, right? We generally operate under reasonable suspicion and probable cause. We need to arrest people. And then I think I read some reports, I don't know if you've seen them, where people like are just almost like indignant about, no, they were clearly lying. Oh. Or they were obviously hiding criminal activity, or they're obviously nervous. Well, whoa, they were showing signs of nervousness. Describe those.
Yep.
I wouldn't make those blanket statements that they were obviously nervous, because we honestly, as cops, does our intuition tell us that they're nervous? Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's one of the things you love about the job, and you follow your intuition and that hunch, and it pays off. But there's observable facts that are leading your intuition. That's what you're basing your intuition off. Even if you don't even consciously recognize it sometimes we do this so often. But then when you watch your body camera, or you going through that interaction again, that's when it's important to document, hey, I had an intuition because of these observable facts.
Be able to articulate your intuition.
Absolutely. Which is tough.
Yeah, to be able to articulate. That's one of the things I bring up in classes, being able to articulate to yourself, not just in a report, which is obviously very important for later on, but to be able to articulate yourself, well, I'm noticing this and this, and I know this to be possibly A, B, or C. not 100%, like we talked about
Yeah.
hyperhidrosis and other medical conditions for pinpoint. Because you know as well as I do, if you write that, like they're nervous, and well, how do you know? How do you know they weren't shaking because of Parkinson's,
Right.
or some other neurological disorder, like where they were shaking because they were cold? Well, it was this temperature out. Okay, not everybody. Maybe they're from Florida, and then that's why the 55 degrees.
Yeah, thin blood, you know.
Yeah, thin blood.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you just want to stick to the observable facts. Like let that reader come to the conclusion, like, well, you know what? Someone who's shaking and is sweating profusely when it's cold out and isn't making eye contact, or whatever it is, whatever you're observing, let that reader go. Sounds like that person was more nervous than they should have been talking to that cop, and that's why that cop became suspicious.
Let me ask you, what's a number one thing you think people need to remember when they're writing reports? What's the most important thing when you're going to sit down after your BS report for the stolen lawn gnome and your realistic report when you were in the fight for your life and your radio flew off? What's the number one thing people should really keep in mind when they're writing a report?
Be honest, right? Be known as an officer who has integrity, because if you're honest, even if you make a mistake or something, be honest, be factual, try to keep opinions out, like, until you can quantify them with, based on my training, education, experience, I thought this person was I've seen people like this, people who are under the influence of opiates exhibit these same symptoms, right? But just be factual, be fact-based. I think try to keep opinions out. Yeah, I think when in my course, I try to teach, like, I give a little bit of a formula about, hey, if you follow these, 7 or 8 little things, it's going to make your report read better. Okay. But if number one is objectivity. Be fact-based. Be honest. Don't freaking, if something's not there, don't make it be there, right? Like, don't have that predisposition. Like, sometimes when you're younger, you go out and you're overzealous sometimes, and you want to make that arrest, and you're like, well, don't make something there that's not there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there was Rob Ferrero talks about in his class about, like, there was one cop in his county who, like, every car back in the good old days when marijuana was illegal in New Jersey, right? And you could search a car for it. Like, every car smelled like weed. Well, is that true? Not every fucking car smells like weed that we stop, right? You know what I mean? That you're going down a bad road there. I think if you start with that predisposition, like, you're going to be known quickly as a cop who's not honest. So just be honest, stick to the facts. And if you follow your intuition, if you follow the training the street cop teaches, and you become good at watching behavior, I think you do well in this profession. Like, and your hunch is going to pay off, right? It's like, that's the thing I love about this job, and is when you follow your intuition and your hunches, and they pay off based on the facts you observe, right? And then be documenting those facts.
Yeah, and that intuition comes from somewhere.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, being able to articulate it to yourself. Is that intuition didn't just fly out of fucking thin air. And
right.
There's a reason why. You might not be able to articulate it to yourself at the time, but later on you're like, oh, well, this is probably why I felt this way, because of A, B, C, or D.
100%.
So there's a couple photos I'm going to show you.
Sure.
One of, let's start with 3 types of blading. And I would really like to know how you would describe this in a report, just because I categorize them as a slight, prominent, and enhanced blade. So I'll start off with the slight blade, and if I could show you the picture of the slight blade, if you let me know how exactly would you describe this in a report, so that someone could say, okay, I got someone blading their body out towards me. Yeah. How am I going to write that? Because we write blade. You know what blading is, and I know what blading is.
Absolutely.
And because it's pretty much our interview stance. However, when you put that in, you describe, well, what is a blade? Well, it's a knife blade turned. What does that mean to the person, to the layman?
Yeah, I again, factually, what is this person doing? Well, they're standing, their left leg is slightly out in front of their body, like their right shoulder is back, is at an angle, at a 45-degree angle away from you. The same with that whole right side of their body is, and their hand is by their hip, the right hand is by their hip, near their pocket area. Yeah, explain exactly what you see. Like, let that layperson know what blading is. I mean, I think as cops, we're so cognizant of it. Like, how often, like, I still stand bladed when I'm talking to people. Like, it's a habit. Like, you don't even think about it. But I think most people don't. Most people, if they're having a conversation, are facing each other.
Yep.
So you want to let the reader, like, figure out, oh, why is this person? And, like, before we got on the air, you were talking about, well, as you want to keep them in a position where they're not bladed. So I think it's even more important, like you were saying, like as you turn, so now they're not bladed and now they're turning away and staying at that angle. That's really where you have to get into. Well, as I recognize them to be partially bladed. And in my training, education experience, it could be indicative that they were potentially going to charge at me, or they were going to potentially had a weapon on that side they were blading. So I moved, so that they weren't standing that way, but yet they changed their body to continue standing at that angle. You want to just, because anybody that's watching that body camera is going to see what's going on, but they're probably not processing it the way that you and I would be, as far as like the civilian is going to go, well, what's the problem here? Yeah. And you want to explain, like, this is what I was thinking. I've seen this before. And especially if you like talk about enhanced blading and now their hands are in their pockets. Again, hey, how many times do you tell them to take your hands out of their pocket? Yeah. Like I told them 4 or 5 times. That's fact. That's a fact. Like there's no disputing that. That's how I would describe that. Like as accurately as you can. Like, and there are exercises you can do to get better at being objective. And even in class I talk about when you go on a call that probably isn't going to be challenged anywhere, right? Even like you go to a father-son or a mother-daughter or a mother-son dispute. It's not a DV. You walk in, they're both crying, right? And like, I don't think anybody's going to dispute that they're upset. Yeah. Right? Is anybody going to ever dispute that they're upset? But how about in that case, why not just get better at going, you know what? When I walked in, I saw that the mother had tears rolling down her cheeks. And when I asked her questions, it was hard for her to answer my questions because she was sobbing so much. That's a better description of upset than, and I don't think like that report, right? Nobody's ever really going to challenge upset in a report like that. I don't think. But that's where maybe you practice getting better at being objective, like in those reports, like, and you might have a supervisor go, what the fuck are you like? Why are you getting so detailed here? And I get it. Like, especially if you're in a busy department, like it's hard to be, maybe you're stacking up calls and stuff like that. But I think it's really important to be fact-based and objective and stuff like body language, behavior, especially if that person who's bladed eventually does turn out to have a weapon, right? Where you want to say, hey, this is what was going through my mind at the time. And as I moved, they moved. And like, just be accurate, as accurate as you can.
So then with the prominent blade, if you look at the picture, I always describe this as being that someone's perpendicular to you. They're actually giving you the shoulder. It's almost like a 90-degree angle.
Yeah,
they're
it's like
towards
they're hiding
you.
their whole side of their body.
Yeah,
Right?
now, and that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I move around, you keep doing that, you're gaining proxemic distance from me too, and you're backing up a little bit. Well, okay, that's an issue. How would you describe it the same? Is there anything you would add to that besides giving the shoulder? And is there anything else that you would put down?
Yeah, I just think again, like you factually described now, like if they started at a slight blade and now they're at a prominent blade, right now they turn. So I basically couldn't see the whole right side of their body. I had to make an effort to turn to see what they were doing. Like it looked like, I couldn't see their pocket or their hip or whatever. Like the only thing I could see, like they were basically perpendicular to me. Like they were in a straight line. I could see their left shoulder. I couldn't see the right side of their body.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think this is great. Like, listen, anybody out there listening, like pick up Sean's book and look at these pictures and ask yourself, like, how would I describe this? Factually, how would I describe this? Not like, because it's easy to draw opinions from these, right? You could go, hey, this guy looks like he's about to tackle me, but he could also be like I'm not being like, he could be a hunchback or something, right? Where he's got some kind of problem that makes him bend over, like, and that's the way he normally is. But it's not going to be like one thing. It's usually a totality of things. Like, hey, these are all the things I was seeing. This is why I believed that he was perhaps going to tackle me. I asked him to stand up, whatever the case may be. And look, there's a nuance to being objective and fact-based in your reports. It's hard to do. It's hard to accurately describe everything. And you're only going to get better by practicing.
So the enhanced blade, which at this point, I know what you're going to tell me, describe exactly what you see. But the enhanced blade being one hand in the pocket, the blading of the body, and one hand coming out in what I call, and what it's a pretty well-known term in body language, is illustrating speech. When we move the hand along while we're talking, it could be specific to words where, hey, it's so big, and then it got real small. It can also be that you're just moving your hands around when you talk, which I do a lot, especially in class, you're moving them. So would you use the word illustrate speech with the other hand? Would you say that other hand continued to move about while he was talking? Like what kind of words do you think you would use to, what would you use to describe that movement of the hands?
Yeah, I mean, just on a tangent for a second, like, do some people when they're doing that, do you think that they're either consciously or subconsciously doing that to distract you from what their other hand is doing?
It could be that, and it could also be that other hand just staying on that weapon. Like it could consciously, or someone will be like, hey, I'm moving this other hand. Everything's fine. See my hands here.
Yeah.
I'm not. But also when most people talk, now the overwhelming majority, someone could have a disability or something, you're talking with both hands. You're not one hand, especially if I'm already bladed to one side and that hand's in a pocket and the other hand's out like this.
Yeah.
It's not something you see every day. Definitely move around that person.
Yeah.
You got to at that point. And it's one of those things too, since I know I'm going off on a tangent, but if you see this, what's the first thing we always do? Take your hands out of your pockets. I did it my whole career.
Yep.
But it's something to think about. And I had this brought up to me by someone. They go, well, it's something we don't see every day. It might be to the level where, hey, you go take cover and give commands because it's not something that you're going to see. Because, hey, take your hand out of your pocket. Bang.
Right. And now this, like, now they're thinking this cop knows I have a weapon, so I'm going to use it. Right. You take your hand out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Okay, bang.
And I tell you, there's videos. If you go online, unfortunately, the one I show it to class. I don't show the point where the cop gets killed because I don't want to do that. You don't want to put anybody in the mood and it get up to the point. And I only show this one video, but I think it's that important because it's something you don't see every day. Cop must have felt something was off. The guy had two hands in his pocket. Twice he comes out and illustrates speech. Body's bladed, possible duping delight, smiling at weird points. And that could have been nervousness as well. You'd never know. But the one hand coming out twice after the second time, he must have had the hair on the back of his neck. He goes, hey, you mind if I pat you down real quick? He goes, no, turns even more, pulls the gun and ends up shooting him. It's one of those things, but what do? You hold the arm and say, hold on, I'm going to pat you down. Do you wait till backup arrives? Well, maybe they're going to shoot as soon as backup. You just never know. And I think you might have a better plan than I do, and maybe someone else does. But the way it was described to me is to take cover and give commands. It's probably the safest way to go about it.
Yeah.
And something to think about.
It's definitely something to think about, right? Like, and up until we had this conversation, like, I can't say I in that particular circumstance, have I thought about taking cover and giving commands? Because you usually figure you can handle it, right? You're like, oh, this guy's going to take his hands out, or this girl, whoever, is going to take their hands out of their pockets and be compliant. Yeah. But you're right. Like, and unfortunately, I think we have to start thinking about that stuff more. And like, I talk about this with a lot of the younger officers. Like, you have to like mentally rehearse situations constantly. Yeah. No matter where you work. I work in. If anybody knows anything about Wyckoff, like we're an affluent town. It's at night. It's sleepy, but we're not far from Patterson, and stuff does happen. And like that's the thing. That's another thing we get a lot too, right? Where you work in Wyckoff, nothing happens there, right? Like and everybody just takes things for granted. But guess what? Shit does happen. It happens everywhere. And I think it's easier to become complacent in smaller towns, and so always be mentally rehearsing stuff like that, and that's great. I think that's a great thing you brought up as far as if you're out there, mentally rehearse something like that. Like if someone is not taking their hand out of their pocket, maybe back up and take cover and let them ask you, what are you doing? Like, dude, I'm a little in fear for my safety right now. I don't know what you have in your pocket. Like, and until I'm, confident that you're not armed, I'm taking cover. I have someone else come, whatever it is. I'd rather you go home at the end of the day than make a mistake. Cause Sean, how many cops have you worked with that fucking can't read body language and can't read people, and you're nervous for them when you're like on calls? Like you're like, fuck, like this is, how do you not pick up on this? Like, and there have been times where I've been groups of 2 or 3 cops that aren't picking up on things, and it's like, shit, man, like, and how do you teach that? Because someone's gonna get hurt because of it,
especially when they're new, and that's what the academy should be. In my opinion, I don't run. I know they got so much stuff that get handed down from the state that they got to do, so they just don't have the time. But there's so much stuff that we can go beyond the felony yawn, felony stretch basics. Right. Watch the hands. Well, yeah, you watch the hands, but what exactly are we watching for? I mean, there's just so much more out there that they should, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they should be going over. Right.
I agree, especially today with our hands are tied, right, with all these freaking, the marijuana laws that have changed in New Jersey. I know, people in other parts of the country don't have to worry about this, but like, for people who are just coming onto this job, especially in New Jersey, it's like, wow, we really have our hands tied here. So you have to be, extra cautious and get good at reading body language. And because you want to go home at the end of the day. And if you can't read people, like you have to be able to talk to people. And I think the phones and social media, I know we're going a little off on a tangent, but like people don't interact as well as they used to anymore. How about like the younger officers we have, right? Like that are very comfortable in front of a computer or on a phone, but like when they have to interact, it's like, you're like, dude, go over there and talk to that person. And it's like, shit, like if you can't talk to people about regular stuff, how are you going to like sort through it when shit is getting a little dicey?
And that's one thing, like you talk generational, and I'm not bashing the younger generation or anything like that, but
no, it's just they're different.
They're
right?
different. It's a different, when we grew up, you talk to somebody on the phone. There was no text messaging.
Right.
So, and when text messaging first came out, I'm like, what is this? I go, what are you doing? I call the person right away. First time I ever got one. It's my brother. I go, what are you doing? Why are you text? What did you just send me? What is this? I don't have time for this. You just, especially because you had to push the number button a million times
to get the letter. Yeah.
So I'm like, what is this? But we always talk to people since you were a kid. You called somebody up and you're like, hey, can I talk to whoever? Hey, you want to go play ball on the street? You want to go meet here and play football over here?
Or you got home and you got a message on your answering machine.
Exactly.
Those old days, like you didn't have to worry. You weren't like constantly on edge about, oh my God, did I miss a call or did I miss a text? Like there was not, you had no choice. Like you'd have to wait to get home from school to get a message on your answering machine or at night. And it's like, it's almost, it was almost nice back then, like without the
free
instant. Yeah, there was some more freedom, and
that's what I would go out west. And I even when I go out west now, I'm pretty much doing classes out there too on vacation with my family. So I kind of have to keep the phone on to see if anything's going on, if the host calls me or whatever. I used to go out to Colorado. 3 years we did, and once in Montana, and I would turn it off. I would put it on airplane mode, and my wife had the phone, so if there was anything, important, we weren't cut off. If something happened with family, they knew, but it was crazy. All I did was have my phone for the time, because I don't wear a watch. And it was so freeing.
Yeah,
and then
nice.
there's parts of Colorado where you don't get good reception anyway where we'd stay.
Yep.
And it was just like, it totally, it takes you back.
It
like
does.
It's, and the beepers and stuff, like you think about, but you actually talk to people. You didn't just like, all right, I'm sending a message, which it is convenient. I'm not doubting that. You're like, hey, let me send this message. What do you think? As opposed to, you imagine today how connected we are making phone calls to everybody. It would just be insane.
Completely. Nobody answers their phone anymore. That's why, I'm like, if you're out there, get people's email addresses too. Cause like, I don't know about you, but if I see a number I don't recognize now, I'm not picking it up. Then maybe they'll text you and they say, hey, Mark, it's this person. Yeah. But, as far as like law enforcement goes, if you call from headquarters, they're probably not going to pick up the phone. I'm not texting them from my personal phone. I have a phone from the bureau. Maybe I'd use that. But like, I don't think most road cops have their work phones, at least in Jersey.
I think someone told me like Westfield or something.
Oh, yeah?
It might have been Springfield, one of those fields in Union County.
Yeah.
But, but 100% majority we don't. But like, what I mean? They said they had it in the patrol car or something. Like
okay.
they would get assigned.
Maybe you'd be inclined to text somebody there, but like there's no guarantee. But you know what? Emails, like how we all have email on our phone now. You hit that, instead of hitting the text button, you just hit the email, button. Yeah. And there it is. So get email addresses from people when you're out in the field. That's my advice, because like people will actually answer emails and they're usually pretty quick about it, because it's like a little bit more of a delay than a text message. That's it.
And that's, I'm glad you bring that up, because in patrol, I was like, what is this email box when you have someone arrested or when you take a report, and I would never fill it out. Then you become a detective and you're like, all right, well, this is something you could probably use to later on.
Yeah.
For, you know what I mean? Like it's great advice.
Definitely. Listen, and like, I look at it this way too, like get as much information from a person as possible, because guess what? Like, wouldn't it be nice, or I use that, if another agency called you up and said, we are investigating or we're looking for this person for something. And you go, I dealt with them and here's everything we have on them. I have their email address. And I know, look, these people are very transient. A lot of people are very transient and they're changing emails and they're changing phone numbers. But you know what? Maybe they were, or their friends, you know what? They were with this guy that day. And now they track him down through, get as much, how can that hurt, right? How does it hurt to get as much freaking information as you possibly can? Like, and I try to tell this in class, like, it's so easy to be complacent in this job and just kind of like check boxes, but don't be that officer. Go, and it's not hard to go above and beyond by just asking all the right questions or asking email address, your friend, whatever, get as much information as you can, because it could help something in the future, even if it's 10 years from now. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look up something, you're like, why didn't this box get checked or filled out?
Yeah.
We could have used this at this point 5 years ago when this person dealt with this person.
Absolutely.
So I pretty much I got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
So being up in Wyckoff, do you recognize the existence of Central Jersey?
I'm so glad you guys brought this up, and here's my take on the dividing line in Jersey.
Okay.
What do you call the meat on a sandwich with egg and cheese? It's not bacon or sausage. What is it?
That was my second question. You already beat me to it.
So
Taylor ham.
Taylor ham. You're North Jersey if you're Taylor ham, I think. I think you're pork roll if you're South Jersey. And wherever that dividing line is
I've heard that. You know what's weird though? I've heard people from from Central Jersey call it pork roll as well.
Yep.
And it's weird because it's like and they live in the same neighborhood.
It's like the Taylor ham pork roll melting pot in Central New Jersey. Like, I think that's where, I think if you're in North Jersey, it's Taylor ham.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it on menus as pork roll in North Jersey. Very rarely. If you're in South Jersey, it's pork roll.
See, I went to canine school up in Bergen County. So we did a lot in Bergen County. And I do think, and I could be wrong, it's been some years, but I think that there were some places you go to, we get breakfast sandwiches, and they would have pork roll up there.
Oh, no shit.
And I could be wrong. Maybe it's my mind.
No,
maybe it was down south. I don't know.
What does it say? It says pork roll on the Taylor ham packages, right?
It says
on Taylor ham.
both, I believe.
Does
it says
it?
Taylor ham, but Taylor ham might be the
Like whatever that brand is with the white.
Red and white.
Red and white, and I think it says pork roll on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it says both.
Does it?
It says
Okay.
Taylor ham, and I think it says pork roll. But we all know it's Taylor ham, number one. But are you denying the existence of Central Jersey? You're giving it a line, but is there a buffer zone? Is there?
I would say, yeah. I mean, shit. I guess we're in Central Jersey now.
That's
I
correct.
wouldn't say we're in South Jersey.
No, we're definitely not. We're not in the Pine Barrens.
We don't
have
talk like
accents.
Sean Morgan, right? Shane Morgan. Like, there's definitely a South Jersey accent. I went to University of Delaware, which is, right northern Delaware, right pretty close to. It's all in that area, So it's like everybody has like this similar accent. Like, I'm not denying. Listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not denying I have an accent. I'm sure people listening to this podcast go, "Oh my God!" Like, we have North Jersey accents, and.
That's the last thing I want to ask you, since you already beat me to the Taylor ham spot. What's a favorite place that you've gone to, traveling?
Oh man, that's a good question. Because I really enjoy. You and I have talked about the traveling. I really enjoy it. Like, with the food, I try to ask people down there, hey, where should I go eat? What do you recommend? And I try to sightsee too. Like, I don't fly in, and some places I will fly in and fly out depending on my schedule, but I try to spend a little bit of time in the town or see the sights. My favorite, I would say Zachary, Louisiana, was great. They were really, the gentleman he's going to be teaching Louisiana traffic law. Is it Ryan? Ryan Johnston, maybe? I apologize. We have so many instructors now. We haven't met all of them. But they were super hospitable. The day of class, I had time after. I'd been down there twice. They actually had me down in July, and they had me down in September because they wanted me to teach essentially the whole department. They worked 12, so
nice.
The first time they sent half their department, and then the second time they sent the other half, which is
Awesome.
really, really great. One of our instructors is teaching there in January, so the night before, the last time I was there, the sergeant there, Jordan, great dude. He's in the National Guard. He was deployed for the hurricane.
Oh, okay.
It was right around that time when Florida got hit. But we met out. We had a bite to eat, and then the next day after class, I went to the department because it was the chief's birthday, and they were having cake for him. And immediately, he walked. It was hysterical. He walks into the room, and he takes the room, and he sees me, and he's like, who the hell is this guy? Clearly, I'm an outsider. But in the night, everybody couldn't be more hospitable down south. And he was he came over, we're talking. He's like, hey, we're having a catfish fry at the local Baptist church. He's like, come over, I'm going to put a plate together for you.
Nice.
Because you have time before your flight. And it was just something you don't experience around here. Same question for you. Where was your favorite place?
I get asked this. I was actually just talking to the wife about this last night. I get asked this all the time. And I don't know, because I've gone to some really Alaska was amazing. I love going to Texas. Yeah. Alaska was legit amazing. Texas has been amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
Washington State. Like I've been Florida when I go. Like, I can't choose.
It's hard.
This
right?
is why I haven't moved yet because I'm like, where do you go? Because there's so many. This country is just so beautiful, and like you, I don't just sit in a hotel. Like I need to go out and I need to see things.
Yeah.
And then you ask the cops, it's like, hey, yeah, go check out this place to eat. Oh, you want to hike? Go to this spot. Go to there. It's just such a beautiful country, and it's one of those things like it's people don't even realize how vastly you go. You know, I'm not shitting on the Midwest or anything, but some of the states, people are like, oh, well, it's a flyover state, Nebraska, Kansas. You go there, you get good food. There's hipsters everywhere cooking up good food around the country. And there's
people
places
are super nice. Too,
yeah.
You know, and like I've talked to Jenna about this. Like we're very, you know, in the Northeast New Jersey, like it's a go, right? Like, and I'm not saying we're not nice, but we're just accustomed to a fast pace and that like instant gratification. And then you go to other areas and like everybody, you know, can't be nicer. You talk to them on the phone, they're super nice. And it's just like, you know, I'm like, we need a little bit of a reevaluation of like, just, we need to slow things down a little bit and be nicer. Not that we're not nice, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming out, Mark. I appreciate it. This is
great.
really good information.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Good. So.
You know, I'm sure anybody who's listening, if you ever have any questions, reach out to Sean or myself, right? I mean, report related, happy to answer anything. If we weren't clear about anything and you want to follow up, just, you know, Mark at streetcop.com and Sean Grogan at streetcop.com, right?
That's correct. SEAN spelt the proper way.
M-A-R-K at streetcop.com.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I
Hey, thank you,
appreciate it.
man. That was awesome.
Guys, if you're in an area where you're trying to get to our classes, but we're not close to you, fret not. We actually have on-demand training at streetcop.com. You can take that course online right now, and then you could attend that training in the future at no additional cost. You can redeem your voucher, so you get 2 for the price of 1. We don't want to deny you the ability to take this training now, especially knowing that it can keep you safe at a very minimum, putting bad guys in jail where they belong, and at the maximum going home to your family. Check out streetcop.com for that offer.